It's either go to jail or go home.
And come back tomorrow.
If you plan on going to jail, I advise that you take a knee and let them take you away peacefully.
All right, so you're hearing a protester tell other protesters, your options right now are go home or go to jail. If you are okay with going to jail, he says take a knee. If you are not okay, he recommends you go home because the time for talking is over and now they are about action. This is their final warning for those protesters. A lot of people saying, why are you in riot gear if you don't want to riot to those officers? So the conversations, as I said, the conversations are over. And now we're going to see what happens here. They've been given their warning, go home or go to jail.
Brittany, the police have
what's
shown,
happening now, another warning.
Yeah, Brittany, the police have shown an incredible amount of restraint. It is now almost 10 minutes after 9 o'clock. Let's listen to the announcement.
This time. You need to disperse. You're in violation of the curfew order at this time.
The announcement stating that that they are in violation of the curfew. Please disperse. Some of them appear to look as if they're moving, but not away from the site. Ashley Thompson has another vantage point from a different section. Ashley, could you hear that announcement?
Absolutely. To my right, Sean, is where that tanker is making that announcement. You can see all of these guardsmen and SWAT and police officers right here kind of just waiting for orders. We have a much different vantage point from our other two crews, and you can see where the protesters are on the other side of this barricade here. I can tell you there's probably about 100 people still left here, which is much different from last night. You'll remember at 9 o'clock last night, most of these demonstrators were gone. I don't know if we could chalk that up to it's Thursday night and we're getting closer to the weekend. Oh, looks like we're getting some activity now. Maybe they are deploying that tear gas. We are going to try to be safe maybe and just back up just a little bit, but we're keeping an eye on what's going on. You see the officers kind of moving the line. They're moving the line. They're moving that crowd, and this is what they've been doing every single day. So they must have just gotten those orders. And it is more than 10 minutes after curfew now, so it is time to move. It is time to act. But I was down here all day again, and marchers were peaceful earlier today, and demonstrators were actually joined by Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms and our police chief Erica Shields. And I actually walked with the mayor around the perimeter of Centennial Olympic Park, and she marched with demonstrators. She wanted them to know that she's with them, that she understands the pain. We have a little bit of what she said earlier today. All right, we don't have that sound. We'll play that for you at 9:30 or 11 o'clock, but she just wanted to tell them that she is walking in solidarity with them. She's a mother of black sons. She understands the struggle. She understands the pain that a lot of people out here are feeling. She knows why people have to be out here. And so she wanted to be here in support of them. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you, Ashley. Let's go to Brittany. Etney, you're really close to this this flank of officers in formation.
Yeah, right now you are seeing law enforcement actively push forward here along Centennial Olympic Boulevard Drive, rather. And what you are witnessing is one of the protesters actually being carried away by two of his friends. He has been yelling. He has been up in the face of one of these responders. They are starting to get very close in distance. A lot of camera lights are going off right now. Can't hear from this vantage point exactly what is happening, but people are trying to hold him back. There has been a lot of restraint here, but this is a very different scene from what we had last night, because last night APD moved forward without all of the shields and the riot gears and was able to disperse everyone quickly. Tonight there's been a little bit more pushback, and while it has been peaceful, this is a different look from last night. But right now it looks like that protester who was being carried away by some of his friends, that he has decided to back up, to start to leave, and we are now seeing the National Guard, APD, and all of the other jurisdictions who are working together make their way further down Centennial.
The optics alone, Brittany, one guy against, you got the National Guardsman and the police department. I mean, he wasn't going to get very far except get arrested. He almost appeared as if he knew the cameras were there and he was trying to entertain.
You know, Sean, I can't speak for what his intent was, but what I can tell you is he was surrounded by cameras. We were seeing the flashing of print photography going off. There was video cameras. There was also multiple people out there with cell phones recording as this was happening. And it really was just kind of one person very excited verbally and kind of speaking to responders and the rest of the line pushing forward from law enforcement. So while they could have taken that moment to detain him, I will say they just kind of let him finish, speaking with his friends, and ultimately he was kind of carried away and supported by his friends after we saw them kind of all grouped together with law enforcement. What you're looking at now, though, is some of the tactical vehicles moving forward as well. A lot of press out here on the sidewalk, but as far as the bulk of the crowd, a lot of those protesters have left, and from our angle now, you're just seeing law enforcement, guys.
A lot of leeway, as you said, being given by the police officers for those 100 or so protesters that are just not listening to them and not adhering to the 9 p.m. curfew, which is now 9:12. So it's already past curfew. And I can tell you what the intent of that guy's buddies were. They wanted to keep their friend from getting arrested, and it looks like they may have been successful in that. Astrid Martinez, let's go back to you, Astrid. You are sort of behind the line of these officers as they are marching forward.
Yeah, I actually had a lot of access today to be in between them while they were trying to look for the lingering protesters. They brushed up against me with their shields, but it's me being in their way because they are trying to block off the street like they usually do every single night to make sure that every single lingering protester is off the street because, it's past that curfew time. They did have a long hour of discussion, not a long hour, but there was a lot of discussion between them throughout the hours. And towards those last, few minutes, there were some protesters that were saying the curfew is a violation of their civil rights and they wanted to stay. So the discussion, was peaceful, but it really wasn't headed in a direction. In the end, we saw that the law enforcement and the National Guard, they pushed through, and they did it this time without any tear gas. Just as soon as they started moving that thick, military line forward, you saw the crowd disperse. Throughout the evening, we've been here for hours now. We walked for miles. We've talked to so many people, and they say that this continues, that they'll be here night after night. They are happy with the charges that have been brought upon the ex-officers, but they believe that that is not enough. For hundreds and hundreds of years of injustices, they want convictions, because many times, they get to this point, but then they also are left with that unsatisfied feeling that they don't get that equality, that they don't get that justice. And I've also talked to them about what's next. Is healing next? And they said, yes, healing next, but before we get there, we need to make sure that we're treated like other people, like human beings, like we're giving our rights, our equal rights. So before we get to the healing, they say they have to mix this message of protesting with voting to make that change. And that's what they're hoping to do next, guys.
Astrid, thank you. Let's go to Brittany Miller, who's now on location. Brittany, that pocket of about 100 marchers have dispersed. Do you see any of them running near you, or is it clear out there too?
Sean, we are walking through the crowd right now. I just want to give you a different vantage point. These are where all of the officers are stationed and standing right now. When I say crowd, I mean a crowd of law enforcement, not a crowd of protesters. You can see they're all just standing here. They've created a line at the front here. We're going to bring you to the front of that line right now, just so you can see what we are seeing. There are no protesters here. We see Atlanta police. We see Atlanta police right here. We see that line of shields right in front of us, and they're all in some sort of formation. Let's see what they're doing. And we are on a side street off of Centennial Olympic Park. And Sean, I'll send it back to you guys as we watch this live.
And Brittany Miller, we're going to take another vantage point with Brittany Etney on location. And Brittany, yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I believe, I'm losing track of time here, but you spoke with City Councilman Antonio Brown from District 3, and he had stressed that if we could just have a peaceful moment where protesters will go home before 9 o'clock, that he's fighting to get the curfew lifted.
Sean, I want to talk about what just happened. So the gentleman that we saw from earlier, who was surrounded by the cameras, is continuing to walk with the crew. What we just witnessed during the other reporters' live, the fact that a group of young men, they actually got stopped by the National Guard shield up, kind of got sandwiched between different jurisdictions. They got sandwiched between two.
You know what we're going to do, Brittany Etney. We're going to, we'll come back to you. We've got a little bit of an audio issue here,
yeah.
but we will come back to you. I think she was mentioning that there was a pocket of marchers that the National Guard had approached, and instead of arresting them, they had dialogue, and then those individuals finally dispersed. But as I was mentioning, Rick, earlier, there was an interview with Brittany Edney. She spoke with City Councilman Antonio Brown, and he said if we could just have a night with everybody would leave.
Maybe we could get rid of this curfew.
The curfew will leave, because that was one of the big arguments of critics. They don't want to see the police. They don't want to see National Guard. But
they don't want the curfew.
They don't want the curfew, but in order for the curfew to get lifted, you got to go home.
And still, there are people, not listening to those orders. All right, let's go back to Ashley Thompson. Ashley, tell us what's going on where you are. Where are you, first of all?
So I know Brittany's microphone was kind of cracking up just a little bit. I'm kind of in the same area as her. I'm on Ted Turner now, and she was saying the National Guard was approaching some of those protesters who had not left for the 9 p.m. curfew. So you can see police now walking down Ted Turner, just making sure people go home. We keep hearing them say, go home, you need to go home. There was a little bit of some tension, some confrontation where some of these law enforcement officers were surrounding those few stragglers, but it appears as if they are now continuing to walk down Ted Turner. They are leaving the scene, and officers have really cleared out where we are anyway. As you saw not long ago, there were a lot of protesters who were here after that 9 o'clock curfew. They have since been moved with the SWAT and the National Guard's been moving the crowd like we see them do every night. So those demonstrators have been moved. They haven't deployed any tear gas just yet, but they are moving them out, and they're using this tactic where they're kind of just following them. Like, let's go, we got to go, you got to go home. And so that's what we're seeing over here on Ted Turner, a side street from Centennial Olympic Park Drive.
And Ashley, earlier today, you were able to get an interview with Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. She was marching with the protesters earlier today. A few of those individuals were very distracting, had megaphones, and were yelling as sort of being critics of the mayor, saying they wanted the National Guard to go, they want the police to go. Were you able to talk to her, and what was her comments in the response to having such a heavy law enforcement presence?
Sure, and we heard some of those comments again tonight as that curfew approached, with a lot of these demonstrators saying, get rid of the curfew. That seems to be the issue that they are taking issue with. But the mayor says, she doesn't want this curfew either. She doesn't want to see the National Guard in her city either, but there has to be some sort of order. They have to maintain order in the city. We all saw what happened last week on Friday and on Saturday with the looting and just the smashing of the windows on all of these businesses downtown, and so there has to be some sort of order. But the mayor came out here just to show the crowd that she does support them, and she understands as a black woman and as a black mother what they're feeling and what they're going through. Back to you guys.
Ashley, thanks very much. Again, it's 20 after 9. The curfew is in effect, and the law enforcement on the ground doing a pretty effective job getting those streets cleared. Protesters also doing an effective job of going home on time. Our coverage continues right after this. Don't go away.